The first time I saw her, she was standing in the conservatory with morning light streaming through the glass ceiling, turning her auburn hair to flame. I'd been hired 3 days prior, and I was still learning which rooms needed fresh flowers on Tuesdays, which carpets required the gentlest touch. Victoria Ashford didn't notice me that morning. She was reading a letter, her silk robe pooling around her feet, one hand absently touching the orchids I'd watered at dawn. I should have announced myself. Instead, I stood frozen in the doorway, watching the way her throat moved as she swallowed, the way her fingers trembled slightly against the pale petals. "Are you going to stand there all morning, or do you have work to do?" Her voice cut through my stupor. I'd been caught staring at my employer like a fool. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I came to tend the plants." She turned then, and I saw her face properly for the first time. She was perhaps 35, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of winter seas. There was something haunted in those eyes, something that made my chest ache even as heat flooded my cheeks. "Then tend them," she said. But her gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary before she swept from the room, leaving only the scent of jasmine perfume in her wake. My name is Clara Webb, and I was 24 years old when I fell in love with a woman I could never have. The Ashford estate sprawled across 50 acres of Connecticut countryside. Victoria's husband, Edmund Ashford, was a railroad magnate who spent most of his time in the city, returning only on weekends. The house staff whispered that the marriage was one of convenience, that they occupied separate wings of the mansion, that they barely spoke even when he was home. I tried not to listen to gossip. I needed this position desperately. After my father died, leaving nothing but debts, I'd scrambled for any respectable work. The Ashford household paid well and provided room and board. I shared an attic room with Mary, the scullery maid, and tried to be grateful for the narrow bed and thin blanket. But gratitude became complicated when Victoria started requesting me. Specifically, "Mrs. Ashford wants you to bring her breakfast tray," the housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, would say with a knowing look I pretended not to understand. "Mrs. Ashford needs help in the library. Mrs. Ashford requires assistance with her wardrobe." I would climb the sweeping staircase to her private rooms, my heart hammering against my ribs, and find her waiting. Sometimes she was reading, sometimes she was staring out the window at the gardens below. Once, I found her crying silently into her hands, and when she looked up at me, something shifted in the air between us. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You must think me very foolish." "No, ma'am." I set down the breakfast tray and did something I absolutely shouldn't have done. I crossed to where she sat and knelt beside her chair. "I think you seem very alone." Her hand moved as if to touch my hair, then stopped. "You should go." But her eyes begged me to stay. Spring turned to summer. The days grew longer, warmer. Victoria took to walking in the gardens in the early morning, and I found excuses to be working there when she appeared. We would exchange pleasantries about the roses, the weather, the way the light fell through the maple leaves. Such innocent conversations. Such dangerous territory. "Did you always want to be a gardener?" she asked one morning, watching me prune the hydrangeas. "I wanted to be a teacher," I admitted, "but that requires money for training. This work suits me well enough." "You're educated, then?" My mother insisted on it before she passed. She believed women should be able to think for themselves. Victoria smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I like your mother already. What did you want to be?" I dared to ask. Before I became Mrs. Edmund Ashford?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I wanted to paint, to travel to Paris and study art, to live in a small apartment with a studio full of light and create beautiful things." "Why didn't you?" "Because women like me don't get to choose their lives. Clara, we get traded like commodities, married off to secure our family's position. My father's business was failing. Edmund needed a wife with the right pedigree. It was a transaction." She'd never used my first name before. The sound of it on her lips made something inside me unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. "It's not too late," I said quietly. "You could still paint." Victoria looked at me for a long moment. "Perhaps you're right." The next week, she had the old conservatory converted into a studio. Canvases, paints, easels, everything an artist could need. She threw herself into the work with a passion that was breathtaking to witness. When I brought her lunch, I would find her covered in paint, her hair escaping its pins, more alive than I'd ever seen her. "What do you think?" she asked one afternoon, gesturing to a canvas covered in bold strokes of crimson and gold. I studied it carefully. "It's full of fire. Like something burning to break free." She set down her brush and turned to face me fully. "You see it? You actually see it?" "Of course I do. Edmund thinks it's a waste of time. He says I'm making a mess of a perfectly good room. But you, Clara, you understand." The way she was looking at me made it difficult to breathe. We were standing too close. I could see the flecks of paint on her collarbone, smell the turpentine mixed with her jasmine perfume. "I should go," I whispered. "Should you?" Her voice was equally soft. Neither of us moved. "This is impossible," I said. "I know. If anyone discovered, I know." "Victoria," she kissed me then. Paint-stained fingers cupping my face, and the world tilted on its axis. I'd never been kissed before. Had never even imagined it could feel like this, like coming home and falling off a cliff simultaneously. Terrifying and perfect and completely inevitable. When we broke apart, we were both trembling. "I'm sorry," she breathed. "God, Clara, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." I kissed her again, my answer clear. When we finally separated, I rested my forehead against hers. "What are we doing?" I asked. "Something very dangerous," she replied. "Something that could destroy us both." "I don't care." "You should. If Edmund found out, if anyone found out, you'd lose your position. Your reputation. I could lose everything too, though perhaps I have less to lose than I thought." I pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "Then we'll be careful." "Careful?" she repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. "Yes, we'll have to be so very careful." Careful meant stolen moments. It meant Victoria requesting my help with tasks that required us to be alone together. It meant me learning the schedule of every servant in the household. Knowing when Mrs. Chen did the marketing, when the cook took her afternoon rest, when Mary was occupied in the SCULLERY. It meant Victoria's studio. Becoming our sanctuary. She would paint while I sat reading aloud from whatever book she'd chosen poetry. Mostly Sappho, Emily Dickinson, Christina Rossetti. Words about love and longing, desire and loss. Sometimes she would stop painting and just listen, watching me with those storm-colored eyes until I had to stop, reading because my voice shook too much. Then she would cross to where I sat and kiss me until I forgot every reason we couldn't do. "Tell me something true," she whispered one afternoon. Our bodies pressed together on the old velvet settee she brought to the studio. "What do you mean?" "Something real. Something you've never told anyone." I thought for a moment, my fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "When I was 15, there was a girl in my village, Anna. She was the blacksmith's daughter, and she had these strong hands and this wild laugh. I used to make excuses to walk past the forge just to see her. I didn't understand what I was feeling then. I thought there was something wrong with me." Victoria's hand found mine, our fingers interlacing. "There's nothing wrong with you. Or with me. Or with this." Society would disagree. Society is run by men who fear anything they can't control. Our love is not shameful, Clara. Hidden, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But not shameful. Our love... The words hung in the air between us, acknowledgement of what we'd been dancing around for weeks. "I love you," I said, because it needed to be spoken aloud at least once. "I love you too." She kissed my knuckles. God help us both, but I do. Summer deepened into something lush and heavy. Edmund came home less frequently, caught up in business ventures that Victoria never asked about. When he was in residence, she played her part perfectly, the dutiful wife, cool and polite, presiding over dinners with impeccable grace. I served at those dinners sometimes, part of the household staff moving invisibly around the table. It was torture to watch her smile at him with distant courtesy, to hear her make small talk about nothing, to see the way he barely looked at her, as if she were simply another piece of expensive furniture. Once, as I was pouring wine, her hand brushed mine. The contact lasted less than a second, but I saw her inhale sharply, saw her fingers tighten on her napkin. The next day, she painted something dark and turbulent, all grays and deep blues, like a storm over the ocean. Does it hurt? I asked, watching her attack the canvas with aggressive strokes. Pretending? Every moment. She didn't stop painting. But the alternative is worse. If he ever suspected, Clara, men like Edmund don't simply divorce their wives. They destroy them. He would have me declared insane, locked away somewhere. And he would make sure you never worked again. Worse, probably. The fear in her voice chilled me. Has he ever hurt you? Not physically. But he's cruel in other ways. Small cruelties, casual dismissals. The way he speaks to me sometimes like I'm simple or tiresome. The way she stopped, set down her brush. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. I want to know everything about you. I moved to stand beside her. Everything that brought you to this moment. She turned to me then, cupping my face with both hands. You are the only good thing in my life, Clara Webb. The only real thing. Everything else is performance and pretense, but what I feel for you, this is the truest thing I've ever known. We became reckless in our carefulness. Victoria started taking me on drives into the countryside, ostensibly so I could help her find subjects to paint. We would pack a lunch and drive for an hour, until we were far from anyone who might recognize us. And then we would spread a blanket under the trees and pretend, just for a few hours, that we were simply two women in love on those afternoons. Victoria would lie with her head in my lap while I read to her, or we would talk about impossible futures where we could be together openly. Or we would simply sit in silence, her hand in mine, watching the clouds drift across the sky. If things were different, she said once, if we lived in a different world, what would you want our life to look like? I thought carefully before answering. A small house somewhere? A garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers. You would have a studio with northern light. We'd have breakfast together every morning and take walks in the evening. Simple things. Quiet things, no adventure, no grand gestures. Just being able to love you openly would be adventure enough. She rolled over to look up at me, her hair fanning across my skirt. I would marry you, you know. If I could. I would stand up in front of everyone we knew and pledge my life to yours. My throat tightened. Victoria, I know it's impossible, but I want you to know that I would. That in my heart, you're already my wife. My love. My everything. I leaned down and kissed her, tasting salt. I wasn't sure if the tears were mine or hers. August brought thunderstorms and tension. Edmund was staying at the estate more frequently, entertaining business associates. There were parties that required the entire staff working late into the night. Victoria and I barely had a moment alone together. I could see the strain on her face. The way her smiles grew more brittle, her movements more tense. She started painting at odd hours, sometimes working through the night. I would find her in the studio at dawn, exhausted and paint splattered, her eyes hollow. You need to rest, I told her one morning. I can't sleep when he's here. I lie awake knowing he's just down the hall, and all I can think about is you in your little attic room, so close and yet impossibly far away. Soon he'll go back to the city. We'll have time again, will we? She set down her brush. How long can we keep doing this, Clara? Stealing moments, hiding what we feel? How long before someone notices? Before we make a mistake? As long as we need to. And then what? We grow old in secret? I stay married to a man I don't love while you waste your life waiting for scraps of my time. I crossed to her and took her hands. Every moment with you is worth it. I don't need more than what we have, but I do. Her voice broke. I want to wake up beside you. I want to introduce you as mine. I want to build a life with you, not just steal hours here and there. And it's killing me that we can't. I had no answer to that. No comfort to offer. Because she was right. The breaking point came in. September. Edmund announced he was hosting a house party that would last a full week. Dozens of guests would be staying at the estate. The staff was in chaos trying to prepare. And Victoria was expected to play hostess. To be gracious and charming and utterly available, we managed one stolen hour on the eve of the party. Victoria came to me in the laundry room late at night after everyone else had gone to bed. We kissed desperately against the wall, trying to memorize each other's taste, the feel of each other's skin. I can't do this, she whispered against my lips. A whole week of not touching you, barely seeing you. You're stronger than you think. I'm not. I'm falling apart, Clara. I feel like I'm losing myself. I held her tighter. We'll get through this. We always do. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. The house party was everything I'd feared. Victoria was radiant in her role as hostess, moving through the rooms in beautiful gowns, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear, dancing with men in the ballroom while an orchestra played. I served drinks and cleared plates and tried not to watch her, but I couldn't help myself. On the third night, I saw her on the terrace with a man I didn't recognize. He was standing too close, saying something that made her laugh. It was her false laugh, the one she used for Edmund's associates, but the man didn't seem to notice. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I had to leave the terrace before I did something stupid. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing serving platters with unnecessary force, when Mary appeared at my elbow. You need to be more careful, she said quietly. My hands stilled. What? The way you look at her. I've seen it. And if I've noticed, someone else might too. Terror gripped me. Mary? I'm not going to say anything. She glanced around to make sure we were alone. My sister. She's like you. She had to leave our town because of it. I know what can happen. So please, Clara, be more careful. I nodded mutely, unable to speak past the fear constricting my throat. I avoided Victoria for the rest of the party. It was agony, but Mary's warning had shaken me. I couldn't risk her reputation, her safety. I couldn't be the reason her life fell apart. But on the last night, she cornered me in the conservatory. Why are you avoiding me? She demanded, her voice low and urgent. I'm not. Don't lie to me. You've barely looked at me in days. The party is over. The last guests leave tomorrow morning. She stepped closer. Talk to me, Clara, please. I told her what Mary had said. Watched the color drain from her face. She knows? She's guessed. But she won't tell anyone. Her sister. Victoria, we've been careless. We have to stop. Stop? Her voice rose, then dropped again as she remembered where we were. Stop loving you? Stop needing you? Stop seeing each other. It's too dangerous. No. She gripped my arms. No, I won't lose you. I can't. You have to. We both do. Before someone less sympathetic than Mary notices. Before Edmund finds out. Before we destroy everything. Tears were streaming down her face. You are everything. Don't you understand that? Without you, I'm just empty, a shell going through the motions. And with me, you're risking everything you have. Your home, your freedom, your life. I can't let you do that. It's not your choice to make. Then I'm making it anyway. I pulled away from her, even though it felt like tearing myself in half. I'll give my notice. Leave at the end of the month. It's better this way. Better? She laughed, wild and broken. Better for whom? Not for me. Not for you. You're just scared. Of course I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I love you too much to let you risk everything for me. The anger drained out of her, leaving only devastation. Don't leave me. Please, Clara, we'll be more careful. We've been trying to be careful. It's not enough. I walked away before she could see me completely fall apart. I handed in my notice the next morning. Mrs. Chen was surprised but didn't question it. These things happened. Servants left for better positions, to get married, to tend to family obligations. She told me I could leave in 2 weeks rather than the full month if I wished. I wished. Every day in that house without Victoria felt like dying slowly. She tried to talk to me. Sent me notes that I couldn't bring myself to read. Appeared in rooms where I was working, only to leave again when I couldn't meet her eyes. She painted frantically in her studio, and I heard from the other servants that the canvases were dark and violent. Full of pain, I packed my few belongings. Found a new position at a boarding house in town, serving breakfast and cleaning rooms for much less pay but fewer memories. Counted down the days. On my last night, I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Mary was already asleep across the room, her breathing soft and steady. I couldn't sleep. In 2 hours, I would wake, dress for the last time in this house, and leave Victoria's life forever. The door opened. She stood there in her nightgown. her hair loose around her shoulders, and I knew I should tell her to leave. To go back to her room before someone saw, but I couldn't form the words. "I'm not letting you go without saying goodbye," she whispered, closing the door behind her. Mary stirred but didn't wake. Victoria crossed to my bed, and I sat up, and then she was in my arms and we were both crying. "Come with me," I whispered desperately. "Leave all this. We'll go somewhere no one knows us. We'll start over. I can't. Edmund would hunt me down. I have no money of my own, no legal rights. If I leave with nothing. We'd have each other. And we'd be destitute, hunted, always looking over our shoulders. Is that the life you want for us? I want any life with you in it." She pulled back to look at me. "If I thought we could do it, really do it, I would go with you right now. But they would find us, Clara, and when they did, it would be so much worse than it is now. So this is it? We just give up?" "I'm not giving up." Her hands framed my face. "I'm loving you the only way I know how. By letting you have a life that isn't spent hiding. By setting you free to find happiness that isn't built on secrets and fear. I don't want to be free. I want to be yours. You are mine. You always will be." She kissed me then, slow and deep and full of everything we couldn't say. "And I am yours, even if we're apart. Even if we never see each other again. Some part of me will always belong to you." We held each other until the sky started to lighten. Then she kissed me one last time and disappeared back into the shadows. A ghost in white, and I was left alone with the dawn breaking through the window. I've been at the boarding house for 3 years now. It's a simple life, as I once told Victoria I wanted. I have a small room and a garden where I grow vegetables. I save my wages and keep to myself. Sometimes I let myself imagine that she left him, that she's somewhere painting her fierce, beautiful canvases and living the life she deserves, that she's happy. I know it's unlikely. Women like Victoria don't often escape their cages. But this morning, something impossible happened. A letter arrived for me. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but when I opened it, a smaller envelope fell out, sealed with blue wax. The outer letter was brief. "Miss Webb, Mrs. Ashford asked me to deliver this to you. She made me promise to tell you that she's well and thinks of you often." A friend, my hands shook as I broke the seal on the inner envelope. "My dearest Clara, Edmund died last month. His heart, the doctor said. Quick and painless, which is more mercy than he deserved. His will left me with more freedom than I ever expected. The estate is sold, but I kept enough to live comfortably. I have a small house now in a town where no one knows me. I've taken a different name. There's a studio with northern light. I paint every day. Sometimes I paint from memory a garden, a girl reading poetry, summer afternoons that felt like stolen eternity. The canvases are happier now. Still fierce, but full of hope instead of despair. I'm not asking you to forgive me for letting you go. I'm not even asking you to write back. But if you wanted to visit, if you wanted to see what I've made of my freedom, I would welcome you. The address is enclosed. I'll understand if you don't come. You've built a life without me, and you deserve to keep your peace. But if you remember what I said about marriage, about pledging our lives to each other, know that my offer still stands. Know that I'm still yours if you'll still have me. With all my love, V. The address is in Vermont. A small town I've never heard of, far from here, far from the estate, far from everyone who knew us as employer and maid. I've read the letter 5 times. The sun has set and risen again. Mrs. Cooper, who runs the boarding house, asked if I was feeling well. I told her I might need to travel soon. Personal matters. Tomorrow I'll go to the train station. I'll buy a ticket north. And when I arrive in that small Vermont town, I'll find a house with a studio full of northern light. I'll knock on the door and she open it, and we'll finally have what we always wanted. A life that's ours, honest and open, no more hiding. The garden between us has finally bloomed into something we can tend together. Endings are just beginnings in disguise. Ours starts now. The train rattled through the countryside, carrying me toward a future I barely allowed myself to imagine. I'd given Mrs. Cooper 2 weeks' notice, packed my single trunk, and purchased a one-way ticket to Whitmore, Vermont, a town so small it wasn't even marked on most maps. My fellow passengers were ordinary people, a mother with 2 restless children, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a young couple holding hands without shame or fear. I envied them their easy affection, even as hope fluttered wildly in my chest. What if she'd changed her mind? What if 3 years had transformed her feelings, made her realize that what we'd shared was merely the product of loneliness and proximity? What if I arrived to find her politely distant, offering me tea and small talk before sending me back the way I came? I pulled her letter from my bag and read it again, searching for certainty in her words. I'm still yours if you'll still have me. The train wheels seemed to echo the phrase. Still yours. Still yours. Still yours. I arrived in Whitmore just after sunset. The station was barely more than a covered platform, and the town itself consisted of a single main street lined with modest shops and houses. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still crowned with late autumn snow. A woman at the general store gave me directions to the address Victoria had provided. The Hartley Place, she said, giving me a curious look. That's about a mile out of town. The painter lady bought it this summer. Keeps to herself mostly, but seems nice enough. The painter lady. Not Mrs. Ashford, not anyone's wife. Just a woman with a profession and a life of her own. I walked the mile as dusk deepened into night. The road wound through a forest of birch and pine, and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. My trunk had been sent ahead by wagon, and I carried only a small bag and my rapidly beating heart. The house appeared around a bend in the road. It was smaller than I'd expected, a white cottage with dark shutters and a stone chimney, from which smoke rose into the darkening sky. Golden light glowed in the windows. A garden, dormant for winter, spread out on one side. And behind it, I could see a larger structure that must be the studio. I stood at the gate, suddenly paralyzed. 3 years. 3 years of living separate lives, of trying to forget the feel of her hands, the sound of her laugh, the way she looked at me as if I were something precious. What if we couldn't recapture what we'd lost? The front door opened. She stood silhouetted in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her hair loose as I'd seen it only once before. Even at this distance, even in the dim light, I knew her. Clara? Her voice carried across the yard, trembling with uncertainty. Is that you? I couldn't speak. I could only nod. She came down the steps, moving faster now, and then she was running, and so was I. And we met in the middle of the garden path, and suddenly I was in her arms, and she smelled like jasmine and oil paint and home. You came, she sobbed into my hair. I was so afraid you wouldn't come. I'm here, I managed. I'm here, Victoria. I'm here. We stood there holding each other as night fell completely around us. Two women who had found their way back to each other against all odds. The house was everything she described in her letter. Small but comfortable, with wide plank floors and a fireplace in the main room. The furniture was simple but beautiful pieces she'd chosen herself. She told me not inherited or assigned by someone else's taste. I wanted everything to be new, she explained, pouring tea in the kitchen. Her hand shook slightly, and I realized she was as nervous as I was. Nothing from my old life. Nothing that reminded me of that house, that existence. Tell me everything, I said. Tell me what happened after I left. We sat by the fire and she told me how Edmund had continued his life in the city, barely noticing her existence. How she'd painted obsessively, pouring all her grief and longing onto canvas. How she'd started selling her work under a pseudonym, V. Hart, and had begun to make a name for herself in certain artistic circles. And then he died, she said quietly. I should have felt something: sadness, relief, guilt. But mostly I just felt free. For the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. Why did you wait so long to write to me? She looked down at her hands. Because I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. Because I was afraid I'd ruined everything by letting you go. Because it took time to settle the estate, to find this place, to build a life I could actually invite you into. She met my eyes. I didn't want to ask you to join me in uncertainty. I wanted to offer you something real. You were always real to me. I know. But I needed to be real to myself first. Does that make sense? It did. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. Show me the studio. The studio took my breath away. It was a converted barn, and she put windows all along the north wall just as she dreamed. Canvases lined the walls, dozens of them, in various stages of completion. I recognized her style immediately, but these paintings were different from the tortured work she produced at the estate. These were alive with color and movement, full of wild joy and fierce beauty. "This one," I said, stopping in front of a large canvas that showed a woman reading in a garden. Dappled sunlight falling across her face and the book in her lap. "Is this?" "You," Victoria said softly, coming to stand beside me. "From memory." "I've painted you 100 times, Clara. You're in every canvas, even the ones where you can't see a human figure. You're in the light, the colors, the energy. You're in everything I create." I turned to look at her. She was watching me with an expression I remembered from our stolen afternoons, vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. "I never stopped loving you," I said. "Not for a single day, nor I you." She stepped closer. "But 3 years is a long time. We're not the same people we were. We should take time to." I kissed her. It was different from our first kiss, from all our desperate stolen kisses in the conservatory. This kiss held 3 years of longing, of growing, of becoming ourselves separately so we could come together whole. When we finally broke apart, we were both crying and laughing. "I don't want to take time," I said. "I don't want to be cautious or sensible. I've had 3 years of being careful, of protecting myself. I want to be reckless with you." "Reckless," she repeated, and her smile was radiant. "Yes, let's be reckless." We were cautious anyway, at least at first. Old habits, old fears. I took a room at the boarding house in town, came to the cottage during the day to help Victoria with the garden with preparations for winter. We told the curious neighbors that I was an old friend who'd come to stay for a while, help with the property, but every evening when I should have walked back to town, I found reasons to linger. "One more cup of tea. Let me help with dinner. It's getting dark, perhaps I should wait a bit longer." Until finally Victoria said, "Stop going back to that room, Clara. Stay here. Where you belong." So I did. We fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. I would wake first, start the fire, make coffee. She would emerge from the bedroom tousled and soft with sleep. And we would have breakfast together at the kitchen table, the simple domestic scene I'd once described as my dream. I tended the garden, preparing it for spring planting. She painted in the studio, sometimes for hours at a time, emerging paint-splattered and exhausted and glowing with creative energy. We took long walks through the forest. We read to each other by firelight. We learned each other again without fear, without hiding. "I want to marry you," Victoria said one night as we lay together in the darkness. "Properly, I mean. I know it's not legal, not recognized, but I want to stand before witnesses and pledge myself to you. I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind that you're my family, my partner, my life." My heart was so full I could barely speak. "Yes, yes? Yes, I'll marry you. However we can. Whenever you want." She pulled me closer. "There's a minister in the next town over. Reverend Sarah Collins. She's like us. She has a partner, a woman named Ruth. They've been together for 20 years. She performs ceremonies for people who can't marry legally. Quiet ceremonies, private, but real nonetheless. You've already looked into this. I've been planning it since before I wrote to you. Hoping you'd say yes. Hoping we'd have this chance." I kissed her softly. "When?" "Spring. When the garden is in bloom. When everything is coming back to life. Winter settled over Vermont like a blanket and we hibernated together in our cottage. Victoria painted while snow fell outside the studio windows. I learned to cook properly, experimented with recipes, filled the house with the smell of bread and soup and roasting vegetables. We read our way through the small library Victoria had assembled novels, poetry, books on art and gardening and philosophy. Some days we barely spoke, content in comfortable silence. Other days we talked for hours, sharing the stories of our 3 years apart, filling in all the gaps and spaces. "I thought about writing to you 1,000 times," I confessed one evening. "But I didn't know what to say. And scrubbing floors and missing you seemed inadequate. I would have treasured any word from you." Victoria was sketching in a notebook, her hand moving absently across the page. "Even a single line. Why did you really let me go?" "The truth." She set down her pencil. "Because I loved you too much to trap you in my cage. I was married, bound, with no way out. You were free. young and brilliant and full of potential. The thought of you wasting your life waiting for stolen moments with me, it was unbearable. You should have let me make that choice. I know. It was arrogant of me, deciding what was best for you. I'm sorry. I moved to sit beside her on the couch. We're here now. That's what matters. Are you happy, Clara? Truly, I thought about it. About my days spent in the garden and kitchen, my evenings reading or talking or simply existing in the same space as this woman I loved. About waking up beside her, falling asleep in her arms. About the absolute freedom of being ourselves openly in our own home. I've never been happier in my life. She smiled and went back to her sketching. I leaned against her shoulder and watched the fire, perfectly content. We weren't completely isolated. Reverend Collins and Ruth became friends, visiting occasionally for dinner. They were in their 50s, weathered and warm, and they treated their relationship with a matter-of-fact openness that was inspiring. We came here 30 years ago, Ruth told us over coffee one afternoon. Back then, we pretended to be cousins. Kept separate bedrooms for appearance's sake. But gradually, as we proved ourselves useful to the community, people stopped asking questions. Or maybe they just decided not to see what was right in front of them. Do they know now? I asked. Some do. Some choose not to. Some genuinely don't notice. Sarah shrugged. We're not hiding anymore, but we're not announcing it either. We exist, and that's enough. Does it ever feel like too much? Victoria asked quietly. The way of always being careful about what you say, how you act in public. Sarah and Ruth exchanged a look. Sometimes Sarah admitted, but we have each other. We have this life we've built. The alternative living apart, pretending we're something we're not, that would be worse. After they left, Victoria and I sat in silence for a long time. We're lucky, I finally said. To have found this place. To have found them. We are, Victoria agreed. But Claire will still have to be careful when we go into town. When we meet new people, we'll never be able to be completely open. I know. And that's enough for you? I took her hand. Being with you is enough. Everything else is just details. The snow melted gradually, revealing the sleeping garden beneath. As the earth thawed, Victoria and I spent hours planning what we would plant. Vegetables, yes, but also flowers, roses, and peonies, and the hydrangeas I tended at the estate. I want color everywhere, Victoria declared, her hands stained with soil as we worked side by side. I want the garden to be as wild and beautiful as your heart. My heart is rather domesticated these days, I teased. Content with simple pleasures. Nonsense. Your heart is a wild garden that's chosen to bloom in one place. That's not domestication, that's devotion. She had a way with words, my painter. She saw poetry in everything daw as April arrived and the first green shoots pushed through the earth. We began planning our ceremony. It would be small, just Sarah and Ruth as witnesses, held in the cottage rather than any church. Victoria had ordered rings from a jeweler in Boston, simple gold bands that arrived in a velvet box. I've been thinking about names, she said one evening as we examined the rings. I stopped using Ashford as soon as Edmund died. Went back to my maiden name legally. But Hart was always just for painting. What do you want to be called? I was thinking, what if we chose something new, together? A name that belongs to both of us, that represents this life we're building? It was a radical idea. Women didn't simply choose new names. But then again, we'd already broken so many rules. What about Webb? I suggested. It was my father's name, but he's gone now. It could be ours. She considered it. Victoria Webb, Clara Webb. She smiled. I like it. Two women named Webb, weaving a life together. That's terrible, I laughed. I'm a painter, not a poet. But yes, let's be the Webbs. Let's weave something beautiful. Our wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather. The garden was beginning to bloom early tulips and daffodils adding splashes of color. I wore a simple blue dress that Victoria had bought for me. She wore cream silk with her auburn hair pinned up. Sarah and Ruth arrived in the morning, bringing a cake Ruth had baked. We held the ceremony in the cottage's main room, windows open to let in the warm breeze and the scent of flowers. There were no grand speeches, no elaborate rituals. Sarah said a few words about love and commitment. about the courage it takes to live honestly in a world that doesn't always understand. Then Victoria and I faced each other and spoke the vows we'd written. Clara, Victoria began, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I vow to love you without reservation, to support your dreams and tend your wounds, to build with you a life of honesty and joy, to be your partner in all things from this day forward for as long as we both live. My turn. I'd practiced these words 100 times, but they still caught in my throat. Victoria, I vow to stand beside you through every season, to celebrate your triumphs and shoulder your burdens, to choose you every day in all the ways that matter, to be your home and your haven from this day forward for as long as we both live. We exchanged rings. Sarah declared us married in the eyes of love, if not in the eyes of law. Ruth wiped her eyes and said something about being too old to cry but doing it anyway. We cut the cake and toasted with wine. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Sarah played the piano. I hadn't even known we had a piano until they'd helped. Victoria moved it in as a wedding surprise, and Ruth sang in a clear alto voice. Dance with me. Mrs. Webb, Victoria said, extending her hand. With pleasure, Mrs. Webb, I replied. We danced in our cottage in the life we'd built, and I felt the weight of those 3 years apart finally lift from my shoulders. We were here. We were married. We were freed. Sarah and Ruth left before dark, giving us privacy. Victoria and I stood together in the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Happy? She asked, her arm around my waist, incandescently. She laughed at my choice of word. I'm going to paint this, she declared. This moment, this light, the way you look right now. I'm going to capture it so we never forget. I can never forget this day. Still, I want to try. We went inside as the stars emerged, built up the fire, made love in our marriage bed with a tenderness that made me weep. Fell asleep tangled together. 2 women who had found their way home that summer brought an unexpected development. A gallery owner from Boston, a Mr. Edward Chun, visited in June. I've been following V. Hart's work, he explained over tea in our garden. Your paintings have created quite a stir in certain circles. I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition this fall. Victoria glanced at me, and I could see the excitement and fear warring in her expression. That's very flattering, Mr. Chun, but I value my privacy. I understand completely. The exhibition would be in Boston, but you wouldn't need to attend the opening if you preferred not to. Many artists are reclusive. It adds to the mystique, honestly. He smiled. I'm primarily interested in the work itself. What you've created is extraordinary raw emotion combined with remarkable technical skill. People should see it. After he left, Victoria paced the studio anxiously. What do you think? I think you should do it, I said firmly. Your work deserves to be seen. You deserve recognition for your talent. But what if someone from my old life sees the paintings? What if they recognize my style, make connections? Victoria, you're V. Hart now. You use a pseudonym. You live in Vermont under a different name. And even if someone did connect you to your former life, so what? Edmund is dead. You're a widow who moved away and took up painting. There's nothing scandalous about that. She stopped pacing and looked at me. What about the paintings of you, of us? It was true that several canvases showed 2 women in intimate settings reading together, walking hand in hand, embracing in a garden. Nothing explicitly romantic, but the love was obvious to anyone who looked closely. Call them studies of female friendship, I suggested. Or don't explain them at all. Let people interpret them as they will. You're not worried? I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm more afraid of you not pursuing this because of me. Your art is part of who you are, Victoria. Don't hide it. She crossed to where I sat and pulled me to my feet. Have I told you today that I love you? Not in the last hour. Unforgivable. I love you, Clara Webb. Your courage humbles me. Then be courageous too. Tell Mr. Chun yes. She did. And suddenly our quiet summer became a flurry of activity. Victoria selected 30 pieces for the exhibition, worked on several new canvases to round out the collection. Mr. Chun arranged for transportation, insurance, cataloging. The show would open in September. I watched Victoria throw herself into the work with fierce dedication. She painted from dawn until dusk some days, barely stopping to eat. Other times she would stare at a canvas for hours, making tiny adjustments to color and light. What if they hate it? She asked one night, exhausted and paint-stained. They won't. What if they love it but for all the wrong reasons? Then they still love it. I pulled her away from the easel and toward the house. Come, you need to eat and sleep. The paintings will still be there tomorrow. In bed that night, she curled against me. I'm scared, Clara. I know. What if this changes everything? What if success means I have to go to Boston, to New York to show my face and pretend to be someone I'm not? Then we'll figure it out together. But don't borrow trouble. Wait and see what actually happens. She was quiet for a long moment. Promise me something? Anything. Promise that whatever happens with the exhibition, with my career, we won't lose this. This life, this peace, this garden we've planted together. I kissed her forehead. I promise. Nothing is worth more than what we have right here. In August, the paintings were crated and shipped to Boston. The cottage felt empty without them, the studio walls bare except for her sketches and works in progress. It's strange, Victoria said, wandering through the empty studio. I poured so much of myself into those canvases. Now they're gone and I feel lighter, but also exposed. They're pieces of my soul and now strangers will look at them and judge them. They'll see what I see, I assured her. Brilliance and passion and truth. We spent the last weeks of summer preparing the garden for autumn, canning vegetables, preserving the harvest. It was physical work that grounded us both. Soil under our fingernails, the smell of tomatoes cooking down into sauce. The satisfaction of filled jars lining the pantry shelves. This is real, Victoria would say sometimes. Holding up a jar of jam or a basket of beans. Whatever happens in Boston, this is real and solid in ours. The exhibition opened on September 15th. We didn't attend. Instead, we spent the day working in the garden and trying not to think about critics and collectors examining Victoria's work. Mr. Chun had promised to send a telegram with news. It arrived the next morning. Exhibition overwhelming success. Stop. All 30 pieces sold. Stop. Critical acclaim. Extraordinary. Stop. More demand than supply. Stop. Please advise. Soonest. Stop. Chun. Victoria read it 3 times, then looked at me with stunned eyes. They sold. All of them. All of them, I repeated. And then we were laughing and crying and spinning each other around the kitchen. Like children, success brought complications. Mr. Chun wanted more paintings. Wanted to schedule another exhibition for the following year. Collectors wrote requesting commissions. Galleries in New York and Philadelphia expressed interest. I don't want to become a factory, Victoria fretted, sorting through the correspondence. Churning out paintings to meet demand. Then don't, I said simply. Paint what you want, when you want. Sell what you choose to sell. The money from the exhibition is enough for us to live comfortably for years. You don't need to compromise your artistic integrity for anyone. She looked at me with such love. How did I get so lucky to find you? Pure chance and desperation, I teased. You needed someone to tend your orchids. I needed someone to tend my heart. Turns out you're good at both. We decided on a middle path. Victoria would paint as inspiration struck, would send pieces to Mr. Chun when she had enough for a showing, but would not work to anyone's schedule but her own. She turned down most commission requests but accepted a few that genuinely interested her. The money from the sales, more than either of us had ever imagined, we invested carefully. We renovated the cottage, adding a proper water system and modernizing the kitchen. We bought more land, expanding the garden. We donated to causes that helped women in need, remembering how precarious our own positions had once been. We should do something for people like us, Victoria said one evening. Women who love women, who need safe places to be themselves. It was a radical thought. Dangerous even. But we were careful in how we went about it. Anonymous donations to certain boarding houses known to be friendly. Quiet support for organizations that helped women in trouble. Small acts that might make a difference. As autumn painted the Vermont hills in shades of amber and crimson. Ruth fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing remarkable. But it lingered, worsened. By October, she was bedridden, and Sarah's face grew drawn with worry. Victoria and I took turns helping Sarah care for Ruth. I would bring meals, help with washing and changing sheets. Victoria would sit and read to Ruth, or sometimes just hold her hand while Sarah rested. Pneumonia, the doctor confirmed grimly. At her age, with her heart already weak. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ruth rallied briefly in early November. Well enough to sit up and joke about being too stubborn to die before seeing another spring. Sarah's relief was palpable. But it was temporary. A week later, Ruth took a turn for the worse. We were there at the end. Sarah sat beside the bed, holding Ruth's hand, whispering words meant only for her partner's ears. Victoria and I stood nearby, bearing witness. Ruth opened her eyes one last time, found Sarah's face. Best thing I ever did was love you, she whispered. Best thing I ever did was let you, Sarah replied. Tears streaming down her face. Ruth smiled, squeezed Sarah's hand, and slipped away as gently as falling asleep. We buried Ruth on a hill overlooking the valley she'd loved. There was no proper funeral, too many questions about who she'd really been to Sarah. Instead, a handful of friends gathered. Spoke about Ruth's kindness, her sharp wit, her green thumb that could coax anything to grow. Sarah stood silent through most of it, a statue carved from grief. But when the last mourner had left, she collapsed against the fresh grave and wept with a sound that seemed torn from the depths of her soul. Victoria and I stayed with her. We didn't speak, didn't try to offer comfort. We simply bore witness to her pain, the way she and Ruth had witnessed our joy. Finally, when the sun was setting and the autumn air had grown cold, Sarah stood. Her face was ravaged but calm. 30 years, she said quietly. 30 years we had together. It wasn't enough, but it was more than many people get. More than we ever thought we'd have when we first met. She loved you very much, Victoria offered. I know. I was so lucky. Sarah looked at us both. You two remind me of how we were in the beginning. That fierce determination to build a life together despite everything. Hold on to that. Time is shorter than you think. We walked Sarah home through the gathering dark. Made sure she had food, that the fire was built up, that she wouldn't be alone unless she wanted to be. I'll be all right, she assured us at the door. Eventually. But thank you for being here. For understanding what we were to each other. In the weeks after Ruth's death, Sarah seemed to age before our eyes. She still performed services, still tended to her small congregation, but the light had gone out of her. I keep forgetting she's gone, she confessed to us one afternoon. I'll think of something to tell her, turn to speak, and she's not there. The house feels wrong without her presence. You loved her for 30 years, Victoria said gently. Of course the world feels wrong without her. Did you know, Sarah said, that we could never tell most people what we really were to each other? When people asked about us, we said we were cousins or old friends sharing expenses. Even in death, the obituary will call her my longtime companion, as if the love of my life can be reduced to such a bloodless term. The injustice of it burned. Ruth had been Sarah's wife in every way that mattered. Yet the world would never acknowledge it. We'll remember the truth, I told Sarah. We'll carry the story of your love. And someday, maybe the world will be ready to hear it. Maybe, Sarah said sadly. But not in my lifetime. Christmas came quietly that year. Sarah joined us for dinner, the first holiday she'd spent without Ruth in 3 decades. We kept the conversation light, the atmosphere warm. After Sarah left, Victoria and I sat by the fire. We could die tomorrow, Victoria said abruptly. A sickness, an accident, anything. And like Ruth, our relationship would be erased. Reduced to longtime companions or dear friends. The truth of our marriage, our love, it would die with us. Not if we write it down, I said slowly. An idea was forming. Sarah said someday the world might be ready. What if we help make it ready? What if we document our lives, our love, for future generations? Victoria turned to look at me. You mean like a journal? More than that. Our whole story. How we met, how we loved, how we built this life. The truth of what it means to love as we do. Hidden now, perhaps, but preserved for a time when it might give hope to others like us. That's dangerous, Clara, if it were found. So we're careful about where we hide it. But Victoria, think about what it would have meant to us. In those dark days at the estate, if we'd known that women like Sarah and Ruth existed. If we'd had proof that love like ours could endure, could build lasting happiness. She was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Then, you're right. We owe it to ourselves and to all the others like us who will come after. Let's write it down. Let's tell our truth. We began that very night. Victoria would paint while I wrote, documenting our story in careful script. Sometimes we would work together, Victoria describing a memory while I recorded it. Or me reading aloud what I'd written while she offered corrections and additions. It was painful sometimes. Revisiting those early days of fear and secrecy. The agony of separation. The impossible joy of reunion. But it was also healing, claiming our narrative, refusing to let it be erased or diminished. Who do you imagine reading this? Victoria asked one evening. A girl working in a household, feeling things she doesn't understand. A woman trapped in a loveless marriage, dreaming of something more. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. That love like ours is possible. Will the world ever be ready? I don't know. But we're writing it anyway, as an act of faith. Faith that someday, somewhere, things will be different. Victoria set down her brush and came to sit beside me. I love you for your optimism. Your stubborn belief in a better future. I love you for your passion. The way you see beauty in everything, even pain. We should write that down too, she said, kissing my temple. All of it. Even the beautiful parts, especially the beautiful parts. Let them know it wasn't all struggle. That we had joy. So we did. We wrote about our garden, our quiet mornings, the way we built a life of simple contentment. We wrote about our wedding, our work, our friends. We wrote about the love that sustained us through everything. The new year brought bitter cold and deep snows. We were snowed in for weeks at a time, but we didn't mind. We had each other, our work, our story that was slowly taking shape on page after page. Sarah visited when she could, helping us refine our account, adding her own perspective on what it meant to live and love outside society's boundaries. You should write your story with Ruth too, Victoria suggested. Add it to ours. A testament to how love endures. Sarah considered it. All right, yes, she deserves to be remembered as she truly was. As the love of my life, not just my companion, so our project expanded. Sarah's elegant handwriting joined mine, documenting 30 years of love and partnership. The challenges they'd faced, the compromises they'd made, the joy they'd found in each other despite everything. This feels important, Sarah said one evening as we worked together. Sacred, almost. We're creating a record that our loves existed, that they mattered, that we were real people with real relationships. Hidden for now, I reminded her. But preserved. That's what matters. Someday maybe not in our lifetimes, but someday women like us won't have to hide. And when that day comes, they'll know they weren't the first. That we paved the way, even if they never knew our names. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Sarah made an announcement. She was leaving Whitmore. There's nothing here for me now without Ruth, she explained. Too many memories, too much grief. My sister has a place in Oregon. She's invited me to come live with her, help with her grandchildren. It's time for a new chapter. We understood that we would miss her terribly. The four of us, Victoria and I, Sarah and Ruth, had been a small family, united by the understanding of what we were to each other. Without Ruth, the balance was broken. Promise me something, Sarah said on her last evening with us. Keep telling your story. Keep living openly as much as you can. Keep building this life you've created. It's important work, even if the world doesn't recognize it yet. We promise, Victoria said. And Sarah? I added. Thank you. For showing us that love like ours can last. For being our witness and our friend. She embraced us both. The honor was mine. You two gave me hope, reminded me of what Ruth and I had built. I'll carry that with me. After she left, the cottage felt emptier. But we still had each other, still had our work, still had the story we were telling. Spring returned, as it always does. We planted the garden with new vigor, adding roses in Ruth's memory, white ones that bloomed prolifically. Victoria painted them obsessively, capturing their beauty in canvas after canvas. Mr. Chen planned another exhibition for the fall. And Victoria selected pieces that reflected our life in Vermont gardens, mountains, the changing seasons. Nothing too revealing, but everything infused with the joy she'd found here. You paint happiness now, I observed, watching her work on a canvas showing our cottage in morning light. Because I'm happy. Truly, deeply happy. Even with the grief, even with the losses, I wake up every day grateful for this life we've built. I understood what she meant. We'd lost Sarah and Ruth's daily presence, but we still had each other. We'd survived separation and secrecy, and emerged into this life of relative freedom. Not perfect freedom, we still had to be cautious, still had to maintain certain fictions. But we had our home, our garden, our love. Read me what you wrote today, Victoria requested. Setting down her brush, I picked up the journal. Found my place and read, we are 30 and 27 now. We have been together in one way or another for 5 years. We have built a life that feels both miraculous and completely ordinary. We wake, we work, we eat, we sleep. We argue over small things and laugh over smaller ones. We tend our garden and our home and each other. To anyone looking from outside, we are simply two women sharing a household, a common enough arrangement. But within these walls, within our hearts, we are everything to each other. Wife and wife, partner and partner, love and beloved. We are proof that love like ours exists, that it endures, that it blooms even in the unlikeless soil. Victoria was crying when I finished. That's beautiful, Clara. It's true. That's all. She crossed to me, paint still on her hands, and kissed me with a tenderness that took my breath away. Let's finish our story, she said. And then let's start a new chapter. Just living, just loving, just being. Yes, I agreed. Yes to all of it. From the Journal of Clara Webb, dated May 15, 1935, Victoria turned 40 today. We marked the occasion quietly, as we do most things, a special breakfast, a walk through the garden now in full bloom. A bottle of wine with dinner. She says she sees gray in my hair now, laugh lines around my eyes. I tell her she's never been more beautiful, and I mean it. She's grown into herself these past years, shed the last vestiges of the woman who was once Mrs. Edmund Ashford. She's wholly Victoria Webb now, artist, gardener, my wife in every way that matters. Our story is nearly complete. Hundreds of pages documenting how we found each other, lost each other, found our way back. How we built this life against all odds. We've sealed it in a metal box and hidden it carefully, with instructions that it should not be opened for 50 years. Perhaps by then the world will be ready. Perhaps not. But it will exist, our truth preserved. Mr. Chen tells us Victoria's work is more sought after than ever. She could be wealthy, famous, if she chose. But she paints only what brings her joy, sells only what doesn't tear at her heart to let go. We have enough. More than enough. I am 31 years old. I have been loved, and I have loved in return. I have built a garden, a home, and a life. I wake each morning beside the woman who is my heart, my home, my everything. The world may not acknowledge what we are to each other. History may never record our names. But we exist. We are real. Our love is real. And that, in the end, is enough.